Hey guys, just a few quick housekeeping items. The first thing is, well, actually, the only thing is that the name is going to change. It's changing from Mobster Musings to Cerebral Stick Up. And the reason for the name change was really because it's just not catchy or streamlined enough. I mean, I like the name, the word mob suit, because it means to be content or satisfied, but it doesn't really give off the kind of reception that I would want someone to have when they hear it. Most people don't know what it is. It's very awkward for a lot of people, and just with the feedback that I've been getting. So I decided to go with cerebral stick up. And again, cerebral, mental, just really deep in the mind. And a stick up where, we're holding the person there. We ask about who they are, what got them to where they are, and really how their life, can motivate others. So today we have a great guest. She's an IFBB professional figure competitor, and currently is preparing just a few weeks out from the biggest bodybuilding competition there is, the Mr. Olympia, held in Las Vegas. She's a certified personal trainer, a nutrition coach, a posing coach, and a model. Please welcome to the show Nicole Zenobia Graham. Thanks for coming on. How's the Olympia prep going for you?
Oh yeah, no problem, no problem. Thanks for having me. The Olympia prep, man, it's definitely a tough one. 'Cause I've pretty much been prepping really since January, going into the New York Pro, then going into Dallas, then going into Tampa. So kind of haven't really had a break. Um, but I mean, obviously, this is this is the most important show in the world, so kind of got no choice.
Sure, sure.
Um,
Do you usually like run your diet all the way through like that, or not really?
I mean, this is the most that I've ever had to compete in a season, to be very honest. So this was definitely a little different. My coaches after the show, they'll let me have maybe like 2 or 3 days of kind of just letting me enjoy food a little bit, but then it'll go right back on. They'll kind of reverse diet just a little bit, and then it'll go right back into what we were already on.
Okay.
Um, and I would say definitely a tough part just because of, I absolutely do love food. um, I have a history of eating disorder before I got into bodybuilding as a fashion
Oh
model.
wow.
So, the food can definitely be a little tough at times for sure.
When you say you had a eating disorder, if you're comfortable with it, like, can you kind of expound on that? Like, what do you mean?
Oh no, I'm very comfortable talking about it. Stupid and young.
Mm.
Okay, well, I can eat and then I could just get rid of it, which was probably the dumbest thing that I could have thought of. I mean, thank goodness I was able to catch it and get myself back to being healthy before I did anything really damaging to my body.
That's tough. Did So when you got kind of into the fashion modeling and stuff, how long did that process like last? How long did you model? How long did you have this disorder?
Let's see. I moved back down to New York City around maybe a good 8 years ago, and living in upstate New York, Schenectady, New York area. So I would say I was probably doing some fashion modeling for about maybe 5 or 6 years. The eating disorder really didn't come about until maybe 3 years into it.
Oh
Uh,
wow. Okay. So for about 3 years you were dealing with that disorder.
Pretty much, right.
Wow. Wow. That's so. At what point did you like? I imagine at some point you decided that that's just not going to work for you. So at what point did you decide that you weren't going to model, and you kind of rehabbed yourself? I assume that's what happened. But go ahead and tell me like how did you go about from having those kind of issues to where you are now?
Gotcha. Well, I still wanted to still be in the modeling industry. I enjoyed the creativity with the photo shoots and things of that nature. Always had an athletic build, background of gymnastics and all-star cheerleading. So I figured, okay, maybe I should try my luck with the fitness industry instead. At least these people are glorified for their bodies versus being pretty much a hanger, wearing designer clothing.
Mhm.
Um, Pretty much, at the point where I was tired was it was during a fashion week working with a designer, and he had already picked me for a show, and I'm like, okay, well, you already knew what you were getting. And then I go in to do a fitting, and he's like, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to put you on this cleanser. You're going to come to me next week. You're going to be smaller. And then you're going to come to me right before the show, and you're going to be a little bit smaller after that. And at that point, I was just like, I'm totally over this. I just
Mhm.
couldn't deal with it anymore.
It just wasn't worth it for you. When you say cleanser, like what are we talking about here? Explain it for people that don't know what that is.
Okay, so I believe the concoction was like cayenne pepper, lemon juice, um, obviously water. Trying to think what else it was. I believe there was like hot sauce in there as well, or something like that. But he didn't want me to eat anything but just drink that for about
Mm.
2 weeks.
Wow,
Um,
yeah, that's pretty intense. Is that common for that industry? I mean, I think we all kind of like have an idea. We think that it's common, but you being in it, can you kind of say whether that's common for a lot of girls?
um, I would say so for sure. I've seen girls, thin as a rail, where I'm seeing, bones almost, about to pass out because what are they eating? They're eating ice cubes instead of eating actual food.
Mm.
And I get it. These girls aren't comfortable with, talking about these things. And, that's why I'm very comfortable with it because I know there's so many others that go through it and aren't afraid to, speak up because maybe they're embarrassed. But yeah, I definitely would see a lot of it for sure.
Wow. So so you get to the point where you're kind of fed up with that. You start your kind of journey into, like the fitness world. Is training, so you're used to kind of like eating with problematic eating, but have you ever like trained before? I know you said you had background in gymnastics, or did you just start weightlifting at that point?
No, well, actually, I've kind of always been around the gym, being that my mom was a bodybuilder years ago. Didn't quite think that that was the avenue that I would ever go down, especially being that she was the division of bodybuilding. And I really didn't know about the other divisions that existed within the sport. So I just started going back to the gym, being a little bit more serious. A guy approached me in the gym, asked me, have I ever thought about competing? And I'm like, okay, competing in what? And he's like, well, I mean, I was just looking at your structure, I think bodybuilding would be cool. And I'm like, I don't know if I really want to do that. But he's like, check it out, look at the different divisions that they have. And I was like, all right, let me see what this guy's talking about.
Hmm.
The first division that came up was the figure division, and I was automatically just blown away. These women were still, extremely feminine, and just, carried a lot of muscle. They were just very, very beautiful. I loved the physiques that they had. I looked at bikini, nothing against bikini. I think it's a great division. I just didn't think it was enough muscle that I wanted. I wanted more. So I automatically went right into the figure division, and competed in my first show in 2016.
Okay, so 2016 was your first year. When did you get your pro card?
I got my pro card 2017.
Okay, so it just took you 1 year to get up there with the pros, huh? That's
Yeah,
pretty. That's
it
is
was
that
shock.
pretty? Yeah, is that pretty quick? I mean, it seems quick. Is
Yeah, for sure. I have a few friends who have been doing it for a while, and it took them about several years to actually get their pro card. So I'm definitely very blessed and, you know, not gonna lie, mom gave me some pretty good genetics because she's got a
Right.
pretty nice back and some good
Right.
shoulders.
Sure.
Um, yeah.
So you said your mother was a bodybuilder. So what years are we talking that she was a bodybuilder? Was this with like Linda Murray? Is that kind of like the
If
look?
I'm not mistaken, I believe she she mentioned Jack LaLanne a lot, so I'm assuming that that's before
Okay.
Linda Murray's time.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting how like figure. I like personally. I think figure is like the best, division for women because it does bring that muscle, and then it's still, relatively like feminine size and look. So I think that's a great like great combination. Um, but so at that point, so you get your pro card, and then how long is this your first Olympia competition, or have you been in the Olympia before?
No, this is my first. Last year was my pro debut, so this
Okay.
is my sophomore season.
Okay. So at this point, you're going to Olympia your first time. Of course, I'm sure you're going in with the mentality to win the show. Everyone does. But what would you consider a
Mhm.
success? Like as you leave the show, at what point do you say, well, this was a successful show for me?
Well, I mean, obviously, I train to win. But for me, one, making a statement, being that my stage presence is a little bit different compared to most. So one, making a statement and, being able to be a top five competitor in my first Olympia would definitely, be a success for me for sure.
Okay, so you cracked the top five and you're happy. Of course, you want to win, but you cracked the top five and you will be happy, pleased with your outcome.
Right,
Okay.
absolutely. And
Yeah, that
I did it too, this is my first Olympia. I don't really think too many have won, their first Olympia. Of course,
right,
we all
right.
about that. But definitely cracking that top five would be amazing, especially standing against women that I've looked up to before I even got to a stage, and to be able to stand next to them and be able to contend with them, I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I read somewhere, and I think I saw it. RX Muscle broke it, or I think Latoria Watts put it on her Instagram, but she's back now, right? So she's going to be competing at this Olympia. Were you aware of that?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah,
you,
that's interesting. She kind of went away there for a little bit, I guess, with some health reasons,
yeah.
and now she's
Yep.
back again. Okay, so that'll make it a much more interesting, Olympia with Sid defending it for, this would be her third time trying to get it. So that'll be interesting. Yeah. So at this point, like, so what do you do as far as like, I know you do some personal training. Can you kind of explain that? Like, what kind of clients do you have, take, so forth?
Well, I'm a personal trainer as well. I kind of more so like to call myself more of a fitness coach, not just being stuck in that training realm. I like to coach people through their goals. So it's not like, I'm just training you to do the movement and that's that. I'm coaching you so that you actually learn something so that if you're not always with me, I've at least given you the knowledge and the tools to be able to do some of this stuff on your own. Um, as far as my clientele, it varies. Usually age wise, I'm usually looking at late 20s. I believe the eldest that I've had was about late 30s. Um, but mostly it's all aesthetics, typically weight loss, anyone looking to build muscle. I do actually have a few competitors as well, about two figure clients as well as some bikini clients.
Okay. So you do regular people as well as competitors, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
which
between personal training and posing, so that would be my other niche as well. Coming from a dancer's background, I also enjoy making up routines for people as well.
Sure. Do you what do you enjoy the most? Which ones? The regular people? Because sometimes when I talk to coaches, some coaches prefer to deal with just the competitors because they're in that mindset themselves and that's who they want to be around. Others prefer dealing with regular people because they love to see the change. So what about you?
That one's a tough one. It's awesome to see people grow as competitors for sure. Um, I think it can also sometimes be a little bit stressful. Even I know myself, and I know the gray hairs that I give my coach. So um, I definitely think it's a little bit more stressful coaching competitors because it's extremely hands-on. It's very tedious. Sometimes I think that I would probably prefer working with regular, clients, especially, clients who are big on weight loss and getting them healthy, um, getting them out of that, chronic disease area, getting their body fat percentage down so that they're actually healthy. Part of that feels a little bit more rewarding for me sometimes. Before I moved down here, I took care of people with mental and physical disabilities. So in
Wow.
a sense, I kind of almost feel like it's that same feeling of being rewarded, seeing their progress and them being healthy and be able to do things on their own.
Yeah, that's actually pretty commendable, especially how long did you deal with people helping people with mental illness and such? Because I mean that's quite uh, you know a work that not a lot of people are willing to do, so it takes a certain kind of heart.
Oh, for sure. I did that for about 6 years.
Oh wow.
Um, in a residential as well as a school setting, and also worked with them as a clinical assistant. So taking them on their medical appointments, doing a lot of direct care.
Sure. Was this during the time that you were modeling, or is this already at a you started kind of bodybuilding or training at this point?
This was just starting to get into fashion modeling.
I see. I see. Okay. So with the figure, division, the way it's set up, are there any girls in the show? And I don't know how much you pay attention to who's actually in the show. I imagine you're as we talked before, you're very tunnel visioned, at this point. But are there any girls in the show that you've beaten before in other shows, or this will be all new competition for you?
Most of it will definitely be new competition for me. The only one that I had beaten was Martina Yabakova, which, to be very honest, at Tampa, that probably could have gone either way because she looked amazing as well.
Hmm.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, when I had looked at the wrap up from day one, it was whether they were going to go with a more so harder physique, a little bit more similar to the thickness that Latoria has,
Hmm.
or if they were going to go with someone who was just a little bit softer with the physique, a little bit closer to the current Miss Olympia Sydney, which they decided to go with a little bit softer and more towards Sydney's physique, which is why they went with me.
Right. Okay. So, well, I mean, that sounds like that's a good thing because if Sydney's winning Olympia after Olympia, that seems to be the look that they're looking for. So it's that's something that's should be a feather in your cap for that. So are you at this point like what are your macros looking like? Are you like zero carbs at this point, completely all the way through, or where are you at with your nutrition?
Well, my nutritionist, we don't really count the macros per se. I just pretty much follow whatever is given.
Okay. All right.
At this point, I don't even want to think about
Right.
numbers or anything
So
like
that
that.
low. So that low
My
that you don't want to think about it.
like my brain can't even take it right now. But we are at a carb cycle, so it's 2 days of none, then a day of relatively kind of low. And then it goes right back to 2 days of none. And right now we're at all fish.
All fish. So you find yourself getting like a leaner quicker when you do all fish?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, it seems to be the case. I've been trying to kind of when I usually try to diet down and everything. When I go to all fish, weight just drops so fast. It's in some cases almost like too fast. If you're a man trying to keep a lot of size, that can be an issue. So, is there a weight that for men like a lot of times either weight is restricted by the division that they're in. If they're in the open, they're trying to be as heavy in most cases as possible. There's some variation to that. With figure, are the girls and you in particular, are you looking for a particular weight that you're trying to hit, or not so much?
Um, Not so much because there's no, real weight requirement. But typically I usually teeter between 133 to
Mhm.
135. So like my sweet spot typically is that 133 marker.
What's your height?
I'm 5'4".
You're 5'4", at 130, 33, 35, something like that. Yeah, I mean that's pretty solid. Do you what's your off season weight, if you don't mind me asking?
Ooh. Yeah, my off-season weight definitely goes up there. I'm usually anywhere between 163 to 166.
Okay, so I mean, significantly higher than your competition weight. So like about 20 pounds or so, 20, 30 pounds. When do
Yeah.
you, when do you start kind of like bringing it down? Like when does your off season end, and then you start kind of start lowering the pounds?
I mean, typically, if I started off, say for example, the New York Pro being my first show, because we typically like to do a nice long prep so that I'm not racing toward the finish line and
Sure.
to do a crap ton of cardio and worry about burning off any new muscle. So we're looking at what usually to the end of like January-ish is when I would start, even
Hmm.
though New York Pro was like all the way in May, but it allows me that nice long window of not racking my brain on like, oh my gosh, I got to get ready. But I definitely know that this off season will be very different. It won't be as long. God willing that I get invited to the Arnold. Um, I think that I would have maybe 2 months of an off season before I actually started to get ready for it.
So, so in that case, when you let's just assume, because I'm sure it'll happen, that you're gonna get invited to the Arnold. You've got those 2 months. What is your idea for those 2 months? Are you trying to so let me ask it this way. Sydney posted some pictures of her recently of in a few years some years ago. I don't know how many. And then when she was winning the Olympia, there's significant amount of muscle added and roundness and shape and so forth. Are you trying to do more of that, or are you not trying to add any more size to your muscle mass at this point?
Um, at this point, I'm not really too upset at the size that I am now. I definitely think there are some areas that I do want to add to. Me personally, I would like to, maybe come up a little bit more with the shoulders. Um, what else? My back is pretty decent. It's got a lot of definition back there, but it can always use, a little bit more depth, a
Sure.
little bit more fitness for sure, I think. And then to be very honest, I always feel like you can never get enough hamstring, so I could always use some more of that.
Right, right. Yeah. That makes sense. So what would you consider your like best body part and then your worst part? I know you mentioned some that you could work on, but if you could narrow it down to two, like what is your best, body part? Let's start there. And then what's your worst?
I would definitely have to say my back would probably be my best body part. Um, I get complimented a lot
Right.
with when it comes to my back between the thickness that I do have and the detail that is back there,
From your mother's genetics and all the hard work, I'm sure.
for sure. As far as I would say, my worst body part, I've struggled for a long time as far as getting the conditioning on my legs. This by far has been the best season when it came to conditioning with my legs. Um, but I will probably have to say maybe my glutes as far as getting them as dry as I need to get them.
Hmm.
Um, this season was the first time I was actually able to look at a stage shot and actually see a few glute striations in my back pose.
Okay.
But that's just all been a part that I've struggled with for sure.
Progress. At least it's progress, right?
For sure.
So, so, so let's say, I mean, like, let's say everything happens the way you want, right? You crack the top five in the Olympia. Um, let's say you get invited to the Arnold. You know, you do well there. How many shows outside of the Arnold? How many shows are you planning to go? You know, to do next year?
Um, I mean, honestly, the best and smoothest plan that I would have would be obviously do the Arnolds because it's definitely a prestigious show. I would love to be a part of that. The next show after that would absolutely have to be New York. I'm from New York.
Right. Local.
Definitely, yeah, it would definitely mean a lot to be able to just take my own hometown show for sure.
Right.
And I took second this year, hoping that we'll move up a spot
Right.
next year. But to be able to take that and get my qualification at New York, that would be great, and really be able to take the time to properly build on what I would want to build for the next Olympia.
Okay. Yeah, that I mean that makes sense. New York makes sense because New York is a pretty big show too. Arnold obviously, so those are two big shows that if you do well and that's a big deal coming into the Olympia. What about my I forgot my question now. Oh, what I was gonna say was that if you um, if you do these multiple shows and everything and you get to the Olympia next year, do you have to do you have to win a show to for people that don't know, do you have to win a show to get to the Olympia? If you don't win a show, is there another way to get into the Olympia?
Yes, there is. How it works is I know that they did change some rules this year depending on what division you are. But I believe it's 25 shows or less for that particular division. If that's the number of shows or less, if you win a show, that automatically qualifies you for the Olympia. Um, if not, then there's a point system. So depending on how big the show is, what tier of show it is, will depend on how many points you get. And I believe that they take the top three um, for points.
Okay. Okay. So I mean, I'm sure that you will win multiple shows, so you don't have to worry about that. But at least they have a way for for others to to still have that experience in the Olympia if they don't win a show, because I imagine it could be tough, going against people like you and some of the other you know more developed figure competitors, especially if you're young and you just got your pro card and you're kind of still not as developed as the rest of those girls. So, do you usually keep up with like other divisions, or do you only like really focus on figure?
For the most part, I do. I'm definitely liking Classic right now. These guys are just coming in crazy. I mean, I've always been a fan of Classic to begin with, just because it's more of that old school bodybuilder shape, but obviously,
Right.
more conditioning behind it. Been keeping up a little bit with the women's physique division. Um, Sorry, bikini won't keep up as much. um,
What do you think about the women's physique division? Like, I was talking to someone earlier, and originally when they started, um, it seemed like, and disagree with me if you feel that way, but it seemed like the women were a little bit. more feminine, where they were just slightly, larger than the figure girls, but not quite as large as the bodybuilding, which they were essentially, I mean, phasing out at this point. Um, Now it seems like those girls are getting bigger. Is it look that way to you, or are they still keeping about the same size?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's exactly how it's looking. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact of women's bodybuilding is kind of diminishing. I think it's great that, Wings of Strength still gives them that platform. But I think it's also definitely hard for you to take out something that is at the top of the food chain, which did kind of, split up all the other divisions. So, if you're taking, women's bodybuilding really away from the scene and, you still have women who are in it and they still want to compete. So, of course, what are they going to do? Women are very competitive and they will try to dial themselves back and they'll move themselves down to the next division. And I think that's what's happening with
Hmm.
women's physique, which definitely is tough because then you see some of the, original, women who were smaller in women's physique are like, well, I don't know exactly how I want to do this. Do I want to get bigger or, do I want to just stick to where I am or do I want to try to scale myself back and do I want to maybe move into figure? And the lines are definitely getting blurred because I've seen some of these girls move down into figure, at the same time, I've also seen some figure girls, who see what they're up against and they don't, want to either take themselves to the next level or stick to where they're at and decide that they want to push themselves down into the bikini division.
Hmm.
So even though I'll even say that bikinis even gotten a little bit, harder with, muscle definition.
For
Um,
sure.
you know, I just think that the lines are kind of blurred at this point. It would be nice to, really exactly differentiate the divisions and exactly say what we're looking for in each division, so that the
Right.
lines aren't weird. Because sometimes I don't know what I'm looking at, to be very honest.
Right. Right. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I agree with all of that, but about the bikini girls, what was interesting was that I believe one time in particular, I was looking at a bikini girl, and it wasn't in competition. It was just a picture, and I
Mhm.
thought for sure she's figure, and I can't remember who it is. It's not really important, but I thought for sure she was figure, and then I figured out no, she's bikini, and I'm like, wow, these bikini girls are getting a lot more lines, like a lot harder than they used to be.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So
I've seen some bikini girls who are bigger than some of the figure girls. I'm like, oh my.
yeah, so I imagine that's really tough for someone that maybe they're too big for a bikini. Let's say you're in the on that line. I mean, of course, you could be on the other line with your women's physique, and you're too small for women's physique. You're too big for figure, or you could be too small for figure and too big for bikini, and you're kind of left without a home. I mean, does that happen? Do you see that happening at all?
I think I've probably seen that from a great deal. Especially for, the bodybuilders in general, women's bodybuilders. I mean, those who, they don't want to take down their hard work because they've worked years in order to get, the sizes that they've gotten.
Sure.
And it's like they have nothing to left really to do. I mean,
Right. Right, because yeah, there's nowhere to go, and it's tough you get to that point, that muscle, it's hard to get that muscle back like down to women's physique. If
mhm.
some of these girls are so big that they can't even make women's physique, at least not
For
do it
sure.
and do well, so yeah,
You
that
know,
go ahead.
I I've also seen, example again, women's physique who have, tried to scale it back to go into figure. And, it's not to take anything away from them. I think they look absolutely amazing, but at the
Right.
same time, there's a difference between the structure, you can tell. And I
Right.
could still tell that you were women's physique. I mean,
Right.
yeah, I mean, figure has, capped shoulders and this, that, and the third, but there's still a difference.
Right.
You can definitely tell.
Right. There's a different look, to these divisions, which is why that those lines need to be there, because otherwise it just becomes this minutia of people that you don't know who's where, and what the judges are looking for and so forth. And I imagine it's hard to prepare for a show when you don't know what physique this division is really gonna um, validate or reward.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So
Absolutely. I think it also goes into conditioning as well. As I mean, I remember looking back at, the original rules to the divisions, and, like I said, bikini, they're getting harder. The last time I checked, it was more of like a shape that you were looking for, but not quite muscle separation. And now you're
mhm,
just seeing a lot of separation.
right,
It's the same thing with figure. We're supposed to have, cap shoulders, obviously, muscle separation, but really not really visible striations. I'm gathering
mhm,
it's okay, if there's like one or two, obviously, because of muscle maturity as the years go on.
right,
But I'm seeing like full on striated glutes and quads. Um,
sure,
and it's
sure.
supposed to be the same thing I believe with women's physique is, they want a certain amount of hardness, but not quite too hard. And then
Mhm.
obviously women's bodybuilding, I mean, it all goes plus with the size.
Right. So speaking, I was going to ask you about that. Speaking with men's bodybuilding there, what do you think about everything that's going on um, in that division, as far as who's going to be there, who's not, you know,
Right.
all that.
This one's gonna be, man, this Olympia, I think, was definitely a pill to swallow for sure, unfortunately with what Sean's going through. Um, and then you got Bonac and not having his coach right now because of
Right.
personal situations
Right.
there. I think there's definitely a lot going on, and we definitely know that it's going to be a new Mr. O this year for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I've seen some of the pictures on Instagram. I definitely think, there's a few people who have a really good shot. Um, I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Wh-
will say is though, what I appreciated with Sean's physique was that they kind of went back to what bodybuilding essentially was, not necessarily just going off of just straight mass.
Right.
They went with what was a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. Not that there's anything wrong with, being a mass monster. I think that's amazing, and it's a lot of work to be able to kind of, to be able to put that kind of mass on your body. But at the same time, I look at bodybuilding as an art, a sculpture. It's about aesthetics and symmetry. And I just don't think that the physique necessarily should just be blown out. We still want a certain amount of aesthetics to show,
Right.
which
So I mean,
a
go ahead.
classic
I'm
so much.
sorry.
Oh no, you're fine.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because as I look at some of these bodybuilders over the years, that if you put a geometric shape on them, sometimes they're more circular. And when I start seeing somebody that's so massive, and then they
Mhm.
have they also have, oh, some of these, but I'm not gonna say every one of them, because some of them come in incredible, look and shape. But some of them, when their stomachs are a little more bloated out, they have almost like a circular shape. And to me, that's, even though you might not be aesthetically pleasing in the mainstream, you should at least have some kind of like structure. You shouldn't look like a circle all the way around, even though you have a lot of mass, a lot of muscle everywhere. It has to be something. How sometimes they'll talk about a woman having like an hourglass shape. There should be a shape with a male bodybuilder. So I think Sean Roden definitely had that shape. It's definitely sad that he has to go through that. What do you think about and if you'd rather not talk about it, because I know you're in the show, but the AMI's decision to pull him as soon as that news comes out of his arrest?
I had mixed feelings, to be very honest. Obviously, I don't know exactly what happened or, what
Right.
truth there is to anything. I get it, on the IFBB's part, because at the end of the day, like, we still want this to be a family show. And to kind of have something like that, I gather, kind of just all through the media pretty much. And I guess, a lot of, parents and whatnot would probably frown upon it. So, I do get it, but then at the same time, I kind of wish that maybe we could have backed him up maybe a little bit more, being
Sure.
that we exactly know the truth. We don't really
Right.
know. I've always felt that it should be, innocent until proven guilty type of thing.
Right.
Um, so it's there's some pros and cons here for sure, but I get it for the most part, being that it is a family based show,
Mhm.
and I believe that they didn't want to really display something like that, especially this is Mr. Olympia. It's not Miss Olympia. The show is called Mr. Olympia. He is at the top of the food chain, and he is
Right.
representing everyone. So
Right.
I get it, but then at the same time, I wish that we could have kind of stood behind him a little bit more.
Right. Chris Aceto was hot about that. Like he was so upset that they immediately. Are you? I'm sure you are, but are you aware who Chris Aceto is? Right? Correct. You broke up a little bit.
Saying yeah, for sure. I definitely know who that is.
Yeah. I figured you did, but for those who don't know, that's Sean Roden's coach, and he was so livid about the fact that they pulled him. And I see from his point of view, like why he would be so upset because nothing was proven. Nothing. No. We haven't gone through the trial process or anything like that. But at the same time, that's how business works. And unfortunately, as sad as it is, they don't want any black eyes. And that's their way of handling it. With all this, though, with all the struggles that the men are having, Dexter Jackson just keep on winning shows. So it I wouldn't
Crazy.
be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if he either does really well, like a two or a three, or maybe, I mean, there's a good chance he might even win the whole thing.
I mean, he looked great. I saw him at Tampa. He looked amazing. His longevity in his career has been amazing, and to still come back every year and still be a little bit crisper and better. It's not like he's been doing this for a long time, and now you're starting to kind of see things like, no, he's always on point.
Right, right. His conditioning is always the best, which is something that like I always thought is really the skill level of like a fitness competitor, whether it's bodybuilding, whether it's figure. Muscle can be put on, and let me know if you agree, but muscle can be put on by most people. I mean, most people who at least have a decent amount of genetics can put on muscle, but getting shredded, that's a lot of suffering that you got to go through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For sure.
So when you does it make it difficult for you to diet with the background of having a like an eating disorder? Like how I know you mentioned that it kind of was, but like how difficult is it? Are you struggling on a daily basis, or you kind of get into a mode and you can just kind of grind through it?
Pretty much. Sometimes it might take me a little bit to dial myself back in. But usually, once I get to a certain marker, I'm pretty much all in it, and I'm just, it's tunnel vision and just focus from there. But sometimes it might take me a little while to just dial myself back in mentally. Um, I will say my secret, though, what I've noticed, is it seems like before a show, it's always at like a 3 or 4 week marker. I
Hmm.
randomly always go to watch some bodybuilding show, one of the local shows that are around here. And for some reason, that always just flips the switch back on for me. And then I'm right back in the grind mode, which is
Sure,
I
sure.
I just went to one yesterday, so I'm totally
Right.
there now.
So, and we talked about this like over the phone a little bit. So what show did you go to yesterday, and what happened there with one of your teammates, and why was that such an important show for you as well?
Okay. Well, we went to the Victor Martinez Legends Championship. We had two competitors in the show. Both was their first time doing a show. Great kids. Very very young. Lexi, who's a bikini competitor, she just turned 21, I believe, about a week ago. And you have Johnny, who is I believe he's lightweight bodybuilder.
Hmm.
I believe he's like 21, 22. For him it was a little bit more tough just because there weren't that many competitors. It's a smaller show, so it's not like your, Mets or Atlantic States. But this
Sure.
is, I definitely think, a great show to start with and kind of get your feet wet. Very family oriented, and it's just a lot of fun. But he actually wind up going against, some bigger guys for sure.
Yeah.
I think he definitely stood out. His posing is absolutely beautiful. And I believe he held his own for being so much smaller. But I can definitely see a lot of potential if he sticks to everything. Our bikini girl, Lexi, her first show, absolutely stunning. She wound up taking the overall in novice as well as the overall in her open class.
Nice.
So very, very proud of her. Um, uh, but for me, it was definitely more of a prestigious show for me. I typically try to go every year just to enjoy it. Um, but it was the first show that I've ever done. It was in 2016. Um, Unfortunately, being it was the first Legends show, so it wasn't nationally qualified yet. So technically speaking, it didn't count for me to use that as a national qualification. But I did end up winning the novice in figure for overall, as well as the open figure overall.
Well, even though it wasn't, a national qualifier show, um,
Mhm.
it might have done more for you than one that was, because it seems like, you went from there to the Olympia in such a short time. I'm sure it gave you, the confidence that you needed, to get to this point.
Absolutely, definitely. My coach was like, we'll do a smaller show, and this will let me know if this is something that you really want to do, because sometimes people will go through the process and find out this isn't something that they really love. I pretty much knew as soon as I hit that stage is okay, I totally am ready and I want to do this again.
So is that how you, like, if somebody said to you, I want to, I want to start competing. Let's just say figure, because you're in figure, and like, how would you decide, whether they, or how would you suggest that they decide whether they, should pursue it or not?
I'd like to, one, obviously sit down and have a consultation with them and, obviously find the why. What is it that makes you want to do this? And then really just kind of sit down and talk about the details and everything that goes into a prep. 'Cause a lot of people don't really know and they just only see what the end result is. I know for sure I had not a clue on exactly what went into a prep. I was just thinking like, oh, okay, diet a little bit and work out and that's it. I definitely didn't understand the science behind it, water depletion, things of that nature, the carb cycling I had no idea. So to kind of just get that already out there so that they're aware. Also being aware that this is not a cheap sport. It's an expensive sport. So just kind of getting that out there between your tan, between your suit, hair, makeup, nails, etc. getting your registration card before you do a show, paying for your show. So, just kind of putting all that stuff out there to begin with, that things that could possibly maybe stress you out as well.
It's probably the only show where most of the competitors pay more than they, get in winnings. This, there's most. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, no, you're absolutely right, and that's why I always, reiterate to people like this is a sport that you honestly need to love doing. If you're doing it just because, oh, I'm trying to get a check, not really worth it.
Yeah. Not.
Granted,
Yeah.
there's some nice checks here and there, but do it because you honestly love it. I would never say do this because there's some form of money or compensation that you're going to get out of it.
So obviously, I mean, the benefit of the financial aspect of it is you can market yourself, from competing and into training and so forth. Did someone like teach you how to do that, or you just you kind of picked it up by osmosis?
Kind of picked it up. I think a lot of it also had to do with just the fashion modeling background and, doing shows, promoting the show, putting up the flyers on social media. So kind of just that part, in a sense, was a little, I guess you could say, easier for me as far as trying to market myself. Already having the experience with the photo shoots. So the marketing part, I don't think was necessarily too hard. It was kind of just fell into it.
Gotcha. So are you planning with well with 2 months? I'm not sure how much time you'll have, but are you? It sounds like you're going to be very busy. Are you planning to take a break, go somewhere, go on vacation, anything like that?
Unfortunately, probably not. I'm
All
definitely
work.
gonna, yeah. I'm definitely gonna have my head focused on, the improvement season, but at the same time, also having my head to focus on my business as well, being a personal trainer, because, it definitely kind of gets hard to juggle both of them, especially when
Sure.
you get closer to the show and being tired and it's like, oh crap, I gotta train this client here. I have no space here. I gotta eat here. It's just it can be a little overwhelming. But I'm definitely looking forward to getting back to being focused on that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I I can tell because we've been trying to get with this podcast for a few days and maybe it's been a week, and every time like we would talk, I could tell like by the times that you were giving me that there was so much they were later in the day, so you were I'm sure booked up with clients and doing all that like for the majority of the day. So it's a very you know busy life, I guess, as a personal trainer.
Between the personal training and then, obviously if you're getting ready for show and depending on how close you are to a show, then you got your fasted cardio, got to eat,
Yeah.
then you got to train your
How much?
client, eat again.
Mhm. Yeah. How much cardio do you do?
Well, right now I'm at 45 and 45. So 45 fasted. Then I have training
Um,
later on in the day, and then another 45 minutes post.
okay. Okay. So you do it. Do you do it? So you do the post. So like after your glycogen is like depleted through training, but the
Right.
pre is like on the empty stomach.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. And you find that really brings you down, peels you
Oh,
out.
absolutely. I mean, for me, it's like as soon as I usually add in the fasted cardio, that's usually makes the big difference for me.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I've noticed the same thing. As soon as I started doing there years ago, I used to do just cardio just to come in the middle of the day, full of glycogen, doing cardio, didn't do a thing. Once I started doing the fasted cardio, it started making a world of difference. So yeah, definitely. But for as far as like you being busy, truly appreciate your time. I think I've taken up a good portion of your time. It's been about, an hour and some a
It's
few
an honor
minutes.
to be
So
with you.
say what? Say it again. I can hear you.
No, I said it's no problem at all. It's an honor to be asked to even do this. So, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time, and you're more than welcome. I'd love to have you on, other times as well. We'll keep in touch. But again, thank you. And with regard to your training, clients, if somebody wants to, get in contact with you, can you go ahead and, tell everybody how they can reach you, like all the possible ways that they can reach you, for your services?
Oh, sure, not a problem. Well, you have my email address, which is worldofzenobia@gmail.com. That's WORLDZENOBIA@gmail.com. You can contact me through Instagram, real simple, World of Zenobia. If you're on Twitter, same thing. And I actually do have a website that is currently being built, should hopefully be completely up and running before the Olympia. But that will be the worldofzenobia.com.
Okay. Awesome. Well, again, thanks again. I wish you the best. I'm sure you're gonna do great. Uh, I'm not gonna be at the Olympia, but me and my wife are possibly tentatively planning to be at the Arnold in March. So maybe we'll see you there.
Hopefully.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully. I'm sure we will, though. So, all right. Thanks again. Thank you for your time. Take care.
You, no problem. Take care.